In 2022, a tweet claimed Greta Thunberg owned a Bugatti and 9 other luxury cars. It went viral. Millions saw it, none of it was true, so why do so many people still believe she's secretly rich? Claims that Greta Thunberg is worth $18 million started popping up online in 2022. It wasn't from any legitimate financial disclosure or court document. It was mostly from viral social media posts. One of the biggest posts making rounds claimed she owned 9 high-end luxury cars, listing brands like Tesla, Mercedes, and even a Bugatti for flair. It caught fire quickly, getting passed around without much thought. But Snopes fact-checked it and shut it down, showing there was no evidence for any of it. The numbers seemed to come out of nowhere. Celebrity net worth listed an $18 million figure, but didn't link to a source or explain how they came up with it. There is no trail, no speaking fees, no book deals worth that amount, no business investments. It was a guess dressed up like a fact, and people ran with it because it sounded interesting. Some probably didn't even care if it was true, it just made for good engagement. Greta eventually responded herself. On Twitter, now X, she called it out plainly. She said the whole thing was misinformation, pointed to the obvious lack of evidence, and moved on. The tone wasn't outraged, just tired of the noise. She's been dealing with this kind of stuff since she was 15. Anytime someone gets enough attention, especially someone who criticizes the powerful, this sort of rumor becomes part of the routine. So, if those posts were bogus, where does the idea of Greta having secret eco-wealth actually come from? Greta Thunberg wasn't born into wealth or fame, but she also didn't grow up in hardship. Her family is known in Sweden. Her father, Svante Thunberg, worked in the arts as an actor, and her mother, Melina Ernman, is an opera singer who once represented Sweden in the Eurovision Song Contest. That background gave Greta a level of cultural exposure, but not a ticket to enormous wealth. She started her climate strike alone in front of the Swedish parliament. No sponsors, no teams, just a homemade sign and a clear message. What followed? Global marches, speeches at the UN, a Time magazine cover was never something she planned as a career. In fact, she's repeatedly turned down offers that could have made her rich. She doesn't charge speaking fees, and she's not part of any commercial brand deals. The idea that she's pocketing money from her activism doesn't match reality. When she published her book No One Is Too Small to Make a Difference, the earnings didn't go into her personal bank account, they were directed to the Greta Thunberg Foundation, which she set up in 2019. It's a nonprofit based in Sweden, with public financial records available through national registries. The foundation's mission is focused on climate and ecological justice, and its funds are used to support activism and related causes, not to finance her lifestyle. Traveling for her activism is usually covered by groups like Fridays for Future or organizations that invite her to speak. She doesn't fly, which limits her options. In 2019, she crossed the Atlantic by sailing on a zero-emissions yacht to attend the UN Climate Action Summit in New York. It was a symbolic choice, not a luxury cruise. There's no trail of property purchases or luxury assets tied to her name. Her lifestyle remains low-key, and there's no public sign that this has changed, despite all the attention. But while Greta isn't cashing big checks for herself, she's part of something even more powerful. Greta Thunberg doesn't sell products, and she's not cashing in on endorsements. But her name still carries real weight. When Time magazine named her one of the 100 most influential people, it wasn't just a symbolic nod. That kind of recognition puts someone in a different league. Suddenly, she's in the same orbit as leaders, CEOs, and cultural icons, and that visibility means her presence alone can move the needle, not just on public opinion, but on actual money flowing toward climate efforts. Take her appearance at the UN Climate Action Summit in 2019. That "how dare you" speech didn't just make headlines, it stirred people up. After that, several environmental groups reported a noticeable jump in donations. Not because she told people to give, but because her words hit a nerve. People wanted to do something, and opening their wallets was one way to respond. That's influence. Not flashy, but real. She has been invited into rooms most activists never see. The European Commission, the UN, the World Economic Forum in Davos, these aren't events that anyone else just gets into. They invite people they think can help shift public pressure or signal change, and Greta fits that. When she speaks, cameras show up. That kind of platform helps amplify issues that don't usually get this kind of attention. But none of this makes her a traditional brand. She doesn't license her name, she doesn't partner with Patagonia or launch eco-friendly product lines. Instead, the Greta brand, if you want to call it that, is more like a spotlight. She doesn't control where the money goes, but when she points at something, others often step in and support it. That's why environmental campaigns sometimes use her image without even asking. They know her face makes people pay attention, and in the fundraising world, that alone can be a game changer. And this influence hasn't gone unnoticed by billionaires who are shaping the green economy. A few years ago, it was rare to hear billionaires talk seriously about the climate. Now, it's practically expected. Bill Gates, for instance, has put more than $2 billion into climate-related ventures through breakthrough energy. Companies working on clean hydrogen, carbon capture, and next-gen nuclear. Gates isn't just donating, he's backing tech he thinks could become commercially viable while also helping reduce emissions. Jeff Bezos made headlines in 2020 when he launched the Bezos Earth Fund with a $10 billion commitment. Some of that money has gone to nonprofits and think tanks, but also to initiatives pushing for policy changes and large-scale conservation. These aren't casual gestures, these sums are massive, and they've made a real impact on what projects can move forward. Then, there's Elon Musk, who doesn't directly fund Greta Thunberg, but has created a company, Tesla, that aligns with her goals. Tesla's expansion into battery storage and solar energy helps shift the market, even if Musk's reasons are more business-driven than activist-driven. His actions, intentionally or not, support the kind of future Greta argues for, one less dependent on fossil fuel. BlackRock, led by Larry Fink, controls trillions in assets. A few years ago, they barely factored climate into investment decisions. After growing pressure, including public criticism from Greta and other youth activists, they announced they'd start making environmental risks part of their financial strategy. Whether this was a moral decision or just smart business is debatable, but the result is clear: they moved. Greta isn't in business meetings with these men, and she doesn't get a cent from what they do. But it's hard to ignore the timeline. As her global platform grew, so did the climate conversation in corporate boardrooms. That doesn't mean she caused every move, but her influence is hard to separate from the shifts we have seen. Well, let's dig deeper. Is Greta personally tied to any of these billion-dollar moves? When Greta started getting paid for public speaking and book sales, she didn't keep the money. Instead, she set up the Greta Thunberg Foundation in Sweden to handle it. Everything goes through that channel: fees from talks, royalties from her book No One Is Too Small to Make a Difference, and any prize money. The purpose was clear from the beginning: to support groups working on climate justice, social equity, and sustainability. Nothing fancy, just a structured way to funnel money toward causes she already supports. And because the foundation is registered in Sweden, it has to follow Swedish transparency laws. That means it files financial reports that anyone can access. In 2021, its net equity was reported at under $1 million. That's not a guess, it's a documented figure. The actual number makes it pretty obvious that she's not sitting on some hidden empire. No private jets, no private estates, no shell companies in tax havens, just a modest pool of funds aimed at supporting other people's work. The foundation itself doesn't spend big on overhead or marketing. It's not run like a giant nonprofit with paid board members or consultants. It functions more like a pass-through, moving money to grassroots organizations and sometimes covering basic travel costs related to Greta's speaking engagements. It's the kind of setup that reflects how she's operated from the beginning. Keep things simple, keep them honest, and keep the focus on the cause, not the person. That's why the numbers are so public. It's a contrast to what you see in some celebrity foundations, where you never really know what the money is doing. With hers, you can pull the filings and see for yourself. There's no mystery, no mansion hiding in the books, no suspicious spending. So what about all those claims of property, wealth, and flashy cars? There's a lot of noise online about Greta Thunberg's supposed luxury lifestyle. Claims of high-end cars, fancy homes, even a private jet, but none of that holds up when you look at what's actually true. Greta doesn't own a car, let alone a collection. She's not photographed stepping out of anything resembling a Bentley or a Tesla. Most of the time, if you see her traveling, it's by train or in a carpool headed to a protest. She sticks to public transport not because it's trendy, but because it fits with what she talks about. One of the clearest examples of how she moves through the world happened in 2019. Instead of flying to New York for the UN Climate Action Summit, Greta sailed across the Atlantic in a racing yacht powered by solar panels and under the hull turbines. It wasn't comfortable, and it definitely wasn't quick. The trip took 2 weeks, there was no shower on board and no real toilet either. But that decision matched the message she wanted to send. This is how far she's willing to go to avoid burning jet fuel. As for where she lives, Greta still calls Stockholm home. She doesn't have a sprawling estate or a second home in the Alps. There is no record of her buying real estate anywhere. She lives with her parents in a regular apartment, and if she's upgraded anything in her life, it hasn't made the news. People sometimes expect that public figures must be hiding wealth somewhere, especially when they're famous and get invited to international stages. But in Greta's case, there has been no sign of hidden assets or luxury perks. If she's sitting on any kind of fortune, it's invisible and unlikely. She's built a platform that reaches millions, but it hasn't been used to build a lifestyle brand or personal empire. Still, the idea of eco-wealth isn't all fiction. Some public figures are turning sustainability into serious business. When people talk about green influence, they often assume it comes with a paycheck. And for a lot of public figures, it does. Leonardo DiCaprio, for instance, puts real money into environmental causes, but he also invests in businesses like Beyond Meat and Love the Wild, which sell plant-based foods. He's been public about wanting to back things that align with his values, but they're still investments, with financial returns in the mix. His foundation does solid work, no doubt, but he's also a major investor and a Hollywood actor with a long career behind him. Then you've got people like Ashton Kutcher, who isn't usually part of climate conversations, but invests through sound ventures and companies focused on sustainability. He's into the startup scene, so there's always a business angle there. Emma Watson gets a lot of praise for her advocacy in ethical fashion, especially her work with Good On You and other sustainability-focused clothing brands, but again, it's part of a commercial space. Gisele Bündchen has been a US ambassador for the environment and has been involved in reforestation campaigns, but she's also managed a modeling career with major brand deals and real estate investments along the way. All of them seem to be trying to balance values with some kind of financial strategy. Earn a living, do some good. It's not fake, it's just how the system works. But Greta doesn't operate like that. She doesn't have a fashion line, a product, a startup portfolio, or a foundation named after her with her face and glossy reports. Her setup is lean, on purpose. She has been clear from the start that she's not trying to monetize her activism. That's what makes the comparison so off. It's not that she's more virtuous, it's just a different approach. No ads, no business ventures, no side hustles, so Greta's not banking billions. But is there a long-term plan for wealth? If Greta Thunberg ever wanted to cash in, she probably could. Not overnight and not from social media deals alone, but from the sheer scale of her influence. Brands chase relevance, and few names are more tied to climate awareness than hers. If she were to lend her name to an eco-friendly product line, anything from electric bikes to sustainable clothing, it would almost certainly sell. The market for that kind of branding is already huge. Patagonia, for example, built a billion-dollar business without using celebrity endorsements. So, imagine if someone with Greta's global recognition put her face on a product. It's not just about products either. She could easily launch a climate-focused investment fund or ETF. Something backed by her values. Marketed to Gen Z and millennials who care about where their money goes. Companies like Engine Number One and funds like BlackRock's iShares ESG products have shown that sustainable investing isn't niche anymore. Greta could take that model, attach her reputation to it, and attract serious capital. But the thing is, there's no sign she wants to go down that path. She's had years of attention and endless opportunities to commercialize her work, and hasn't taken them. No paid partnerships, no monetized social accounts, no merchandise. There's no Greta Thunberg Foundation hoodie, and no Greta-approved carbon credit app in the App Store. She stayed focused on the activism, not the business. That doesn't mean things can't change in the future. People evolve, priorities shift, but so far, everything points to someone who's more interested in accountability than capital. Her power comes from what she says and does, not what she sells. And that brings us back to the big question. There's a strange thing that happens when someone becomes famous for caring. People start asking how much they're making from it. With Greta Thunberg, the rumors have been constant. Claims that she's pretty rich and secretly rich, and that she's making money off guilt, or that her activism is a front for something more profitable. But when you strip it all down and look for actual proof, nothing holds up. There's no verified evidence that Greta is a millionaire, and the idea that she's anywhere near billionaire territory doesn't just make sense based on what's publicly known. What Greta has isn't wealth, it's attention. And attention, especially when it's focused on a clear cause, can be powerful in ways money can't match. She doesn't own factories or portfolios full of green energy stocks. What she does own is space in the public conversation. When Greta speaks, especially on global stages like the UN or Davos, the people who move money listen. Not always because they agree with her, but because her words stir public pressure, and that pressure eventually finds its way into boardrooms. We have seen this ripple effect. After Greta publicly called out BlackRock for financing fossil fuels, they announced a shift in their investment strategy. Was that entirely because of her? No, but she played a part in raising the temperature. She's not signing billion-dollar deals, but she's pushing the people who do. It's also easy to forget how unusual it is to become globally recognizable without trying to sell something. There's no subscription, no course, no product line with her name on it. The most she's done commercially is publish books, and even then, the earnings have gone straight to her nonprofit. So when people ask if Greta Thunberg is secretly rich, it says more about how we are used to seeing fame than about her. We expect that anyone in the spotlight must be cashing in, because that's how the world usually works. But in her case, that script hasn't played out. She's chosen a different path, one that doesn't come with wealth, but has pulled the biggest names in business and politics into conversations they used to ignore. That's a kind of power too, just not the kind you measure in dollars. Could Greta Thunberg become one of the richest influencers without ever selling out? Leave your thoughts in the comments.